Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave's marketing campaign is in full swing, as this week we get reveals and focus clips for 3 more of the main characters, those being Lita, Dietrich, and Theodora. Last week we covered Kai and the Orneus Rider class, but with 3 fresh new clips, we have a lot to talk about and look into today. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to not miss anything Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave related, as every Friday I will be making a recap video for you all to not miss a single piece of news and speculation about the upcoming installment of the storied Fire Emblem franchise. So on Monday, we kicked off the week with a strong reveal surrounding Dietrich, the elusive swordsman from Fodlan. Before we get started, I'd like to give a huge shout out to Serene's Forest Twitter account for their more detailed and accurate translations. Compared to the Twitter translation tool that's a little bit more rough around the edges, it's been nice to say the least to have this other avenue for translation, so thank you to Serene's Forest. So in his profile, Dietrich is said to like things he finds beautiful, sweets, and his little sister. A little Euritza coded if you ask me, but maybe those traits run in the Lamine family or something. But most importantly, his description mentions that he is from House Lamine. This once again is something that has the prequel versus sequel debate buzzing, since by the time the events of Three Houses happen, the house is essentially defunct, indicating maybe a prequel. But in some of the Mercedes endings in Three Houses, she does restore her house to its former glory, so perhaps some elements of Three Houses were canonized. Again, it's all very up for debate, I think. The clip that accompanies Dietrich's profile has him showcasing combat arts and him using Answerer, which is dubbed a demonic blade but also a hero's relic, which is very interesting because the language around those weapons in Three Houses' lore was adopted after the events of the Red Canyon, where Rhea rewrote history around the artifacts and crests. But it being equally called a demonic blade kind of alludes to an unsavory connotation around it. It could also just be flavor text, since he does look like a vampire, and the combat art he is using in the clip is called bloodletting, giving you a higher crit chance. So that might just be that, but it's interesting to note to say the least. The clip reveals a few things. His class is swordsman, or I think Myrmidon. Again, this is a translation thing I wasn't quite sure about. I don't really speak Japanese, but the tools I use all translated it to swordsman. But in Fire Emblem in the past, swordsman has been mostly called the Myrmidon. So I would assume that is what the class will be called in the game. We get a look at 3 characters we've seen in previous trailers with Dietrich, most notably Brazilian Hatsume Miku, as the internet has dubbed her. She is holding on to a different shield from the previous trailer, and in the original trailer she had no shield, indicating the return of equipable shields, because this doesn't seem like a class thing. It really does seem like she's just holding on to different items at different moments in the game. A few other things to note is a new portrait from the dude in the top right, who is most likely just the boss of this particular chapter, but perhaps also a recruitable enemy. He does have this blue icon under his portrait that almost looks like a sword. It's hard to tell with this level of pixelization, but it will be relevant, as we'll touch more on that symbol in the next clip. We also get what seems to be a look at a promoted Orneus Rider. At least that's what I feel. This one seems to have a little bit more armor on, so perhaps we're gonna get some buff chickens in this game. There's also these 2 things. I guess we have robot looking things now. Some people have suspected online this is a Garthin technology. They might be right, but we got mechs in Fire Emblem now. Nice combo of mechs and chicken. This game is gonna be the game of all time, man. I'm telling you. People have also noted the pipes and telephone poles looking things, which show more of an industrial setting for the arena, showcasing that the gimmicks evolve, but also raising more question regarding the whole time travel thing that's been speculated around this game. When the combat art menu pops up, we can see a few indicators here that I thought were interesting. In last week's video, I had speculated that the yellow icon next to Kai's lance were to indicate experience gain in the weapon when using a certain class, but this here tells me a whole different story. This seems to be an indicator of effective damage, which tells me a few things. Bloodletting or blood flash, the combat art from Dietrich, seems to be attached to his weapon Answerer, and it has super effective against dragons or wyverns, or maybe this means both. This would make sense with it being a hero's relic. Being made from the bones of Nabatean, being super effective against dragons makes some sort of sense. We see another art above with the wing indicating flying effectiveness, kind of like Grounder from Three Houses. I would assume this would be the equivalent to that. But it also tells us that last week it was revealed to us that lances in Fortune's Weave seem to have effective damage against mounted units. Remember from that clips, it was a javelin and an iron lance, so it's not just the horse slayer that seems to have effectiveness against mounted units. It's all lances in this game, which somewhat makes sense when you think about it, but that's what I'm personally reading in all of this. The last last thing I glean is in his various skills, where one is a red icon with both an axe and a sword. This might indicate that there is no weapon triangle in this game. The axe breaker skill icon in Three Houses was a red axe and could only be triggered by a sword. So maybe they modified the icon a bit to communicate the sword aspect better. But if that skill is back, it pretty much confirms no triangle in my opinion, because the hit rate avoid advantage is baked into the skill and not just the weapons themselves. This clip felt like a lot. There was a lot to be able to take out from it, but that is mostly everything we got from the Dietrich reveal. Now let's move on to Theodora, which happened on Wednesday. So in her profile card, Theodora has the description of Megara's torch. In Greek mythology, Megara is one of the three Furies, and she is usually denoted as the jealous one. The word torch to me implies that she had the metaphorical torch of queen passed to her. In a previous video, I did note that I think Theodora's story will be about coming into her own as a queen following the passing of her father, as we see a clip of her without the crown seeking revenge for him in the second trailer. So the torch part implies that to me, and the Megara part might be an actual person in Fortune's Weave, but I think it's more meant in a figurative sense. As I said in the second trailer, her people have a wish and her goal is to make it come true. I believe the people of Ceramus might be envious of other factions within the Empire and wish to have more prominence, and that is the wish she will try to accomplish. Anyways, I'm reading a lot into this, but this is my theory. Sorry about that. Then we're moving on. So her likes are denoted as fighting and the well-being of her people. The clip that accompanies Theodora is focused around gambits, a returning mechanic from Three Houses. A few things to note here. The text here seems to imply that she is the only one who can use the gambit command, which feels a little weird because we've seen the authority icon in previous trailer and we know charm is back as a stat. So that seems weird unless it's a translation error or a misunderstanding on my part. The text also notes that she gets a special weapon, the Mahadu Spear, a weapon yielded by a legendary hero. I believe the distinction here is important from Dietrich's text. It's not to confuse this with a hero's relic. It is just a weapon that was yielded by a hero for Ceramus at some point in the past. In this clip itself, we see her being the noble class, which makes sense given her lineage. She is the queen after all. But it has me wondering if this is like the noble class in Three Houses, where it's not so much a unique class, but a blank slate class that allows you to path in whatever direction you want. Since unlike the two other units we've seen so far, their classes seem to get skill experience bonuses at the bottom of the screen, but this one says none. There's also a star on the tiny class icon. This indicates class mastery, and we'll see that later in the clip too, which might be why there's no bonus experience, or it might be completely unrelated. But those two tiny details stood out to me. On the arena, a few details stands out. We see a bunch of unit with Theodora that we've seen before, but we have a new suspect. This book person, I'm not sure, the icon almost looks like a mask. People have been talking about the cat mask girl from the first trailer. Maybe that's the same person, or maybe it's a whole different faction. I don't know. It's been really hard to tell with these pixelized video. Thank you, Twitter, for having horde quality. Also, it might just be them posting bad quality videos just to keep us a little guessing and not reveal too much. That could also be a thing. But importantly, this character seems to have a green HP bar, meaning they might not be a recruit, but a protect quest on this map, as it seems to be some sort of kind of king of the hill scenario. If my arena having different gimmick depending on the chapter theory is true, that would make some sense. And also, we've seen green units in other trailers in the past, so it seems like you have control over the green units in this. Maybe they just don't gain experience, or they just don't join you fully. The next important thing here is with the blue sword beside Theodora's portrait that we saw before. This seems to indicate gambits, as below her weapon shown in the screenshot, we can see a little text there that seems to be the battalion. So the previous enemy unit seems to have a battalion too. Maybe enemy units can have the battalions, but the only ally that can do it is Theodora. It's still unclear at this point. Might be a way to make bosses slightly more challenging. Or again, it was a misreading on my part from the earlier text. But it's all very much still up in the air for me. The last thing to note here is that each unit except Theodora has a small heart with a number besides it. The heart only appears once she is hovered, which indicates it has something to do with her specifically. A few people online have speculated this might be some sort of support indicator, or indicator that a support is being built. I've also seen a theory that this might be a sort of buff that certain allies gain based on one thing or another. It's still very, very unclear. Again, more questions than answers here. Right before selecting the gambit, which is a rain of arrow, you can see the effectiveness icon at the bottom we talked about with Dietrich and Kai. However, this time it is red instead of yellow and has 2 arrows, which tell me that this game may have varying level of effective damage, maybe 3x versus 2x or 1.5x depending on the type of weapon or type of matchup. That's quite an interesting mechanic to me, and it makes choosing your weapons and type of combat more interesting and diverse in the long run. In her battle forecast, something to note is no crest of Gautier seems to be available, as we saw in a previous screenshot of hers. So something to keep in mind, the crest of Gautier might be narratively significant to all routes or maybe a couple of routes, but it's not there at this moment. Kind of like in earlier clips of Kai, it wasn't there, but it was in last week. So something to be keeping in mind. We also see her use the Gambit, offering an AoE attack that kills all 3 units in front of her in a T formation. And that is pretty much all it for Theodora. Let's move on to the final showcase, Lita, which was earlier this morning. She is described as a highly skilled vihuela player. Seems to be some sort of violin lute type thing, who perform enchanting music, so clearly fitting the barb and dancer class archetype. Her description talks about a certain incident that happened 5 years prior to the events of the game, making her choose to walk a path of vengeance. We know from the trailers that she is seeking a man that she wants to kill, so I'm assuming she's seeking vengeance on him. And there was a short clip that I believe to be the incident referred to here in the first trailer. She likes memories of her parents and things related to performance. I assume the memories of her parents indicate that they have passed, and I assume it is linked to that previously mentioned incident. In the clips sent out to accompany this profile, we might have had the least revealing one yet, mostly things we've already seen. First off, it says that she can switch between melee and range weapons. This also leads to some confusion for me, because if the weapon system is like in 3 houses, most classes could use bows as well as up close options. It wasn't limited like that, so maybe they changed it and brought back weapon uniqueness to each class, kind of like an engage. Something to keep in mind for future clips. Lita here is in the hunter class, and I thought that was bizarre. I thought she was a unique class, but it said that she can use her instrument to buff allies. I'm still unsure if this is a separate thing from her blaze arts that we've seen before, or it's an extra ability, kind of like the dance from the traditional dancer, but this game has it tied to this character instead of a class. Something else to note is that the hearts are back in this clip, so it doesn't tell us much more, but the one interesting thing here is that Lita seems to have no bond with the guy down on the right side who is on her team. Maybe he just joined on this chapter, so no bond has been created yet, but she seems to have a heart with Theodora on the left, who is part of the green team, so the ally group. Does this mean that our protagonists might be able to support each other, or even if they aren't together, maybe they do this to add extra links between them or extra levels of story, or maybe at some point in the narrative they all join together and you can build those supports ranks earlier. Still, again, more question than answers here. We also see 2 new characters at the bottom right we haven't seen before, but not much else about those, just a portrait and weapon type that they're using. In Lita's forecast, we see the purple sword icon we saw before. The name roughly translates to the something woman's fan, so I assume it's a special weapon type for Lita, like the big rake we saw in the Kai gameplay trailer. And in the battle forecast, we can see that Lita also has a crest, the crest of Dominique, which is Annette's crest in 3 houses. The whole crest business is starting to raise a lot of questions. And finally, once again, we see the arena take a different shape, which lends credence to my theory that this battlefield is an ever-changing landscape that evolves as you beat challenges on it, getting closer and closer to the goal of winning the tournament, with each new challenge being a different gimmick, a different area, a different kind of setting. Well, that was a ton of information. Holy moly. I have more questions than answers, but Fortune's Weave is proving to be interesting to cover, to say the least. From what happened this week, I believe it's safe to say that we should expect 3 pieces of news per week on Monday, Wednesdays, or Fridays, which I will break down and cover every Friday right here up until release. That is unless they change their strategy in the next few weeks. Maybe it was just this intense to show off the 3 main characters and they're going to tone it down a little bit. I don't know. If it slows down a little bit, these might become shorts when they are available. But as long as they keep feeding us this much information, I will be here to cover it all for you guys. Don't forget to like the video if this was informative in any way, and subscribe to not miss a thing about Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. Huge shout out to all my Twitch subscribers and YouTube members, but a special shout out goes out to my tier 2 and 3 members, those being Brawler456, Forgotten Fox, Hirame, The Wolfman, Storm Eagle CH, Stylish, A Grumpy Bear, Reploid, El Bunker, Faith Kiera, Santo Show, and Case. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.